Hey everyone, today we're diving into the world of the Mycenaeans, an ancient civilization that was all about power, status, and hierarchy. Back then, your place in society depended on your family, your role in the military or religion, and whether you had connections to the palace. The highest ranks were filled with rulers, warriors, and palace officials, while the lower classes included craftsmen, workers, women, and slaves who kept the society running. The Mycenaeans weren't just great warriors, they built a complex and advanced civilization. Thanks to archaeologists like Heinrich Schliemann, who excavated Mycenae in 1876, we've uncovered a lot about their culture. One of the biggest discoveries was the linear B tablets, clay records kept in palaces that give us a glimpse into their government, economy, and daily life. These tablets recorded things like land ownership, legal disputes, and business transactions. However, they mostly focused on palace affairs, so we still don't know much about the everyday lives of regular people. In the beginning, Mycenaeans lived in small farming villages. They grew crops, raised animals, and hunted for food. But as time passed, their society became more structured, and social classes started to form. By 1400 BCE, the strongest settlements turned into city-states ruled from huge palaces. This was the start of what historians call the palatial era. Powerful cities like Mycenae, Thebes, Turin, Pylos, and Knossos became the centers of Mycenaean civilization, and the ruling class took control. One of the clearest signs of social class differences was how people were buried. Early Mycenaeans had simple pit graves, sometimes even under their homes. But later on, the rich were buried in enormous, beehive-shaped tombs called Thelos tombs. These elite graves were filled with gold jewelry, fancy weapons, and even golden sheets wrapped around high-status children. Meanwhile, ordinary people still had basic burials, showing the stark divide between the rich and poor. At the top of Mycenaean society was the Wanax, the most powerful ruler who controlled the palace and its surrounding lands. Some records suggest the Wanax may have also had religious duties, making them similar to a priest-king. The Wanax was incredibly wealthy and had a large team of officials and workers serving them. They even had special royal clothing that set them apart from everyone else. Just below the Wanax was the Lodges, who was likely the leader of the army. Then there was a group called the Hekitai, elite warriors who served the Wanax and were skilled in using chariots. These warriors were rich enough to own slaves and were responsible for guarding the coastline from potential invaders. The Mycenaean palaces weren't just homes for rulers, they were busy government and business centers. Officials known as collectors helped manage the economy by gathering and distributing goods, though they didn't have official titles in the records. Palace workshops produced luxury goods like perfumes, jewelry, and finely crafted ivory and lapis lazuli items. Scribes kept careful records of everything on clay tablets to keep the system running smoothly. Even though the palace controlled most things, there was some local government as well. In Pylos, for example, there were 16 districts, each led by a curator, similar to a mayor. They were assisted by a procurator, and both worked with wealthy landowners called the Telestai. Another group mentioned in records is the Damos. Some think it referred to the common people, while others believe it was a local governing body that helped manage land distribution. The Mycenaeans created a society where everything revolved around the palace. Their government, military strength, and social divisions made them one of the most powerful civilizations of their time. But there's still a lot we don't know. While palace records tell us about rulers and elites, the everyday lives of farmers, traders, and workers remain a mystery waiting to be uncovered. And the Mycenaeans weren't just builders and rulers, they were fierce fighters. Their entire culture was built around military strength, and you can see that in the massive walls surrounding their palaces and the battle scenes in their artwork. War and combat were a huge part of life, and warriors were some of the most respected people in their world. Strength, bravery, and toughness mattered a lot, and being a warrior wasn't just about fighting, it was about status. Mycenaean warriors dressed for battle in tunics and greaves, with helmets made from boar tusks. They carried large shields, either shaped like a figure 8 or a tall rectangle. Most wore armor made from thick layers of linen, which actually provided decent protection. Some, though, had metal armor, like the famous Dendra panoply, a full bronze suit that shows just how advanced Mycenaean warfare could be. But not every elite warrior was a battlefield soldier. Some may have taken part in duels or ritual combat, fighting for personal honor rather than in war. The Mycenaeans saw warriors as heroic figures, not just for their skills but also for their looks and reputation. Many warrior graves include grooming tools and fancy accessories, proving that appearance mattered just as much as skill in combat. While warriors were at the top, the economy depended on skilled craftspeople and artisans. As trade grew, so did the need for specialized workers. The lower classes were filled with smiths, armor makers, shipbuilders, potters, weavers, and many others. Some worked directly for the palace, while others made goods independently, selling to both the wealthy and common people. Some artisans, especially those working with rare materials like glass or perfumes, held a higher status. There were also collectors, people who managed palace goods and wealth, who likely had influence over many of these industries. Engineers and carpenters were just as important, designing roads, bridges, and even underground water tunnels. The Mycenaeans had surprisingly advanced infrastructure for their time, proving how skilled their builders were. Women in Mycenaean society had very different lives depending on their social class. Unlike men who dominated politics and the military, most women were defined by their work. Many were weavers or worked in textile production. Others were involved in religious ceremonies and burial traditions. Painted coffins, called larnaques, show scenes of women mourning and preparing the dead for burial in a ritual known as the prophecies. At Pylos, some women were priestesses and religious officials, holding titles like key-bearer or servant of the gods. These women had more freedom than most, with some even owning land or taking part in legal disputes. Interestingly, the palace didn't record payments for them, meaning they may have operated outside the official palace economy. Slavery was also a part of Mycenaean society, with slaves known as doulos. Most were women taken during military raids in Asia Minor, though men and children were also enslaved. Many worked in palace industries, helping with production or religious activities. Some, especially those serving high-ranking officials or religious figures, may have had better conditions than laborers. Even within this structured society, there were different levels of status and privilege, showing that life in Mycenaean Greece was more complex than it might seem.